Welcome to MyXO Business Command. Today, we are looking at executive leadership, specifically how founders organize, coordinate, and keep their business on track. Founders often carry the responsibilities of an entire suite. You are managing finance, marketing, operations, and technology, usually long before you can afford to hire executive staff to take those roles. When you are carrying that much weight, you rely heavily on the operational plans you put in place. But occasionally, a plan starts to wander away from the original mission. That introduces a well-documented friction point: sunk cost bias. Leaders will often stubbornly defend these wandering plans. They don't do this out of malice or incompetence. They do it to protect the time, the money, and the sheer effort they have already invested in yesterday's decision. By fiercely protecting the mechanics of a flawed implementation, a leader actively draws resources away from the organization's future mission. Choosing to abandon an implementation does not mean the original plan was weak or poorly conceived. At the time the decision was made, that plan was likely the most logical choice based on the limited information available to the team. Executing the work is what actually generates new, stronger evidence. That new data naturally reveals a more efficient path forward. Shifting direction based on that new evidence is a sign of disciplined leadership. It is an adaptation rather than an organizational defeat. We recently encountered this exact scenario during the early architectural development of the MyXO AI Business Command platform. This visual logic model shows a central hub evaluating and routing tasks to multiple distinct, swappable external nodes. It illustrates MyXO's core operational mission: to remain completely independent by selecting the best available AI model for a specific task, rather than marrying a single provider. To achieve this routing capability, our initial development hypothesis was to test Hermes Agent and Obsidian as the central foundational components of the platform. Integrating these systems was a necessary, logical first step. We needed to put the architecture into practice to gather performance data against our platform's mission. The testing phase quickly produced contradictory evidence. The Hermes implementation imposed a strict 64K context limit. This constraint actively locked out smaller, highly specialized AI models that were otherwise perfectly suited for bounded tasks. Additional friction points emerged shortly after. Persistent memory tool calls began failing, and the system struggled to reliably execute basic memory operations during our evaluations. The resulting data made the situation clear. The selected tool was forcing the MyXO mission to contort around the tool's own limitations. That violated our core objective of platform independence. We halted the integration entirely. Spending additional resources trying to force it to work, merely to save face, would only damage the product. This reset allowed us to formalize our operating standard. This text on screen outlines the executive pivot principle that emerged directly from that decision. When evidence demonstrates that the current path no longer best serves the mission, preserve the learning, release attachment to the implementation, and redirect resources toward the objective. True operational persistence requires loyalty to the final objective. It does not require blind loyalty to the first method you test. In the immediate aftermath of that pivot, we did not treat the time spent as wasted. Nothing of value was thrown away. The team actively preserved the code, the research, the operational knowledge, and the relationships we generated during the Hermes test. This architectural blueprint illustrates our transition. We moved from a single, rigid, monolithic block representing the abandoned test into a modular, multi-part framework where distinct pieces can be swapped in and out. The limitations we discovered directly dictated the requirements for this successful, custom-built modular shell standard. This new, internally owned modular standard perfectly protected the original mission. It ensured MyXO retained control of the executive relationship, state, and governance, while keeping external models as replaceable workers. Technical limitations and roadblocks are rarely dead ends. They are strategic invitations to build a smarter, more resilient system. As a business owner, your ultimate responsibility is to ensure the success of the mission. You do not need to coddle the mechanics of how that mission gets done. Cleanly separating the permanent goal from the replaceable tools gives you the clarity to course-correct fearlessly when the data tells you to. The objective deserves your loyalty. The implementation must earn it. The owner leads. Simon coordinates. MyXO helps run the business.